It's time to go beyond the headlines, cause I don't put in overtime just so I can headline. Okay, now it's Fox Sports, I'm live with Renee. Going hard every day, sports rapping every play. Different segments for your favorites, coming at you daily with positive vibes, yeah, we some game changers. Basketball, football, soccer, with different interviews, you never know who may pop up. Listen, only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines.
In our Positive Vibes Only segment here on Beyond the Headlines, joining us, we have out of Maryland, Dr. Nicole Rochester, a pediatrician and also professional health advocate and mom of 2 young adult daughters. So, Dr. Nicole Rochester, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. And I'm happy to have you on the show to talk about, for you specifically, having worked in the area of student athletes and the important steps they need to take to make sure that they're managing their physical health as they prepare for their upcoming sport, whatever sport they might be playing. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on all that. So tell me and tell everyone else, what really made you get involved in being more than just a pediatrician but also a health advocate?
Yeah, I have found through my life that my life experiences really have shaped my career path. And if you had told me a few years ago that I was going to be anything other than a pediatrician, I absolutely would not have believed you. But back in 2010, my older sisters and I helped to care for our dad, and that was such an eye-opening experience, being a family caregiver and seeing the struggles and the challenges of our healthcare system from the other side of it. And so, after he passed away, unfortunately, 3 years later, and I just was compelled, I just kept thinking back to all the instances where I was able to get my dad the health care that he needed, mainly because of my professional background, my medical knowledge, my influence, whatever you want to call it. And it really kind of angered me, and it just made me think about the millions of other people out here who are trying their best to care for loved ones and don't have that extra benefit. And so I actually left my full-time job in 2017. Actually, yesterday was exactly 2 years, and launched a health advocacy company. And I really, my mission is just to empower and educate patients and family caregivers so that they can really understand this healthcare system and be able to advocate for themselves and get the best care.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear about your dad, but I'm happy to hear all the great things that you're doing. And you actually you wrote a book about this. You took it a step farther. So you're not just talking the talk, but you're providing an opportunity for people to be able to read about these tips that you have in your book, the Healthcare Navigation 101, a guide for college-bound students. Talk to me about what readers could expect from your book in terms of the tips that you're sharing.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to preface it by saying that once again, it was a life experience. So you mentioned I have 2 adult daughters, one of whom has finished college. My younger daughter started her freshman year last fall. And as I was preparing her to go off to school, she is a student athlete. She runs track and does some long jump. And so as I was kind of prepping her about the healthcare industry and about what should she do when she gets sick, and remembering some of the mistakes that I made with my oldest daughter and some of the phone calls that I got when my oldest daughter got sick. So I tried to do a better job with my younger daughter. And as I was prepping her and making her do things like make her own doctor's appointment, go pick up her own prescription, I thought about the fact that, all the kids need this information, just not my daughter. So I decided to write a book. And really it is a guide that ideally should be read by both the student in college or the student going off to college and their parent. And it really just addresses all of the things that most parents don't think about. I remember last year being totally focused initially on, the shopping list and getting things for her dorm and making sure that we had, paid the bill and making sure that her books were ordered and all those things. And those things are, of course, very important. But no one stops to think about the fact that we are literally throwing these kids to the wolves. We're sending them off to communicate independently, to deal with the healthcare system that most of us struggle with. and, they don't have that trusted parent there. They don't have that pediatrician that they've been seeing, many of them, for their entire lives. And so there's a lot of things that they need to know, and we don't adequately prepare them for that transition. So that's really the purpose of the book.
Yeah, I love that because, now, as you mentioned, in the summer, after students are graduating from high school or even in between, one college year to the next, it's more about prepping for that upcoming fall. And as you talk about buying, decorations for your dorm room and matching bedding and things like that. But what about the most important part, your health and your safety?
Exactly.
So that is something that I think a lot of people might take for granted or just not even realize the value of really having those conversations and really finding ways to prepare their children.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. So now, what's something that you have really been seeing that might stand out? You talk about the struggle in transitioning to being a young adult. And I know, even for myself, I'm 26 years old, I still feel like I have a million questions about the healthcare system because it is not easy to read it and thoroughly understand everything. So what's something that you really see as maybe like one of the biggest things that stand out that are a common either misunderstanding or a question that people just aren't really sure about in terms of healthcare?
Sure. I think one of the biggest pitfalls and one of the things that a lot of families find themselves dealing with are not understanding their health insurance. So, many students go off to school in a different state, and many parents erroneously assume that their health insurance plan will cover their student in this other state. And there are some health insurance plans where there is absolutely no coverage other than emergencies, and I mean like true emergencies. And then there are other plans where those services may be covered, but you may have to pay a lot more out of pocket.
And
so, many parents, what happens is the kids go off to school, and again, because they're not accustomed to managing their own health care, they may have an injury or an illness that's relatively minor, but because they're not accustomed to navigating the system, their knee-jerk response, particularly if it's on a weekend or after hours, is to go to the emergency room. And so I've had so many friends and family members and clients tell me stories where, they got this bill for like $300, $500, where their child went to the local emergency room. And so there's several things there. A, there probably were some alternatives that the student could have pursued. And then B, the parent didn't even know that they needed to check their health insurance policy before their student went off to school so that both of them have a clear understanding of what is covered.
Wow, that makes complete sense, and I just learned something myself. That is definitely something, when you talk about insurance, there's no, guide, or there are, but there's no easy way to figure out all of this information until, unfortunately, in some cases, you're being billed for it.
That's exactly right.
Wow. So what's the really big focus that you're doing now to take your tips and your advice to the next step? You've written a book, you're constantly speaking up and advocating for more awareness, especially with young adults around the college age. But what can we really expect that's next for you to really spread that awareness and spread your message?
So I've had a few speaking engagements already, and that's really the next step for me. I really want to disseminate this information widely, and I really enjoy speaking in person and being able to interact with, family caregivers, with patients, with students and their parents, and so that's really the next step for me is to, have additional opportunities to get this message out. I would love to begin speaking on the college campuses as part of their new student orientation. Also, catching them in high school during some of those senior meetings that they have before they graduate. And in terms of, the aging adults and their family caregivers, just continuing to speak at conferences and just really giving individuals the information that will help them to really be able to effectively get the health care that they need and deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, it goes across all age demographics because it's as you're getting older, you're constantly, being put into a situation that might be different than what you're used to in terms of healthcare. And you talk
That's right.
about your experiences and how that has really influenced your work, but that's phenomenal, honestly, and I hope that people do take time to understand that these tips that from what I see anyways, are very minor that can go a long way. These are things that can not only help you financially, but of course with your actual health, which is the biggest concern, and making sure that you're getting the care that you need.
Very true.
Incredible. So where are some of these events? Are you trying to do more locally right now, I guess more in like the Maryland area, or are you working to build a team?
Yeah, I've done some workshops locally here in Maryland. I've done some caregiver conferences. I've also done workshops specifically geared towards the high school audience and those going off to college. So I really would love to be able to do that in, not just in the state of Maryland or in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, but to be able to branch out and offer, this information more broadly.
Right. Well, there you have it. Now is the time. It's no time like the present to start figuring out information to help yourself, your kids, your loved ones prepare for any types of issues they may face in terms of their health. So, Doctor, I have to ask before we wrap this up, where can we find your work in terms of your book and also just anything you're doing on social media?
Oh, thank you. So you can find me on my website, which is www.yourgpsdoc.com. You can also find me on social media at YourGPSDoc and also at TheGPSDoc. The book is available on Amazon, and again, it's Healthcare Navigation 101. There's a longer title, but if you type that in, you can definitely find it. And there's a short link, bit.ly/Dr. Nicole Book.
Yeah, there you go. Make sure you guys follow along as you are doing something that I have not seen, and that's partly why I wanted to have you on our Positive Vibes Only segment, Doc. I mean, I don't see these opportunities and resources readily available for people to just be able to ask a question. You're a mother, you're a pediatrician, you're a healthcare advocate. You check a lot of boxes. You've had a lot of experiences and knowledge that you can provide to people, and you don't often get that help. So thank you so much for taking time to join us and talk about all that you're up to. And I guess my final question for you would be, if there's something specific that you would want people to take away from this. You talk about all that is important in terms of knowing your health care, your insurance, knowing your resources, knowing simple things like I saw your first aid kit that students can have in their dorm. What is something that you would really take away from this for listeners?
I think the main thing that I always like people to take away is that you are the expert for your medical condition. For you, if you're a family caregiver, you are the expert. And I think one of the things that I hear, unfortunately, most commonly is just kind of a lack of regard for, concerns and things of that nature, and particularly, from the patient's and from the family caregiver perspective. And so many people are intimidated by healthcare professionals, and so they will know in their gut that something is wrong, and they will hold back because they are dismissed. And so I just want to say to my, teens and young adults listening all the way up to, 100-plus years old, don't ever feel intimidated in healthcare settings. You know what you're talking about. You know your body. You know your loved one's health and body better than anyone else. And so just be an advocate for yourself and for your loved ones and speak up.
Yeah, if something feels wrong, there probably is something wrong.
Absolutely, that's right.
I love that. Be your own expert. Thank you so much, Dr. Nicole Rochester, you guys, out of Maryland, who has a book out that you can read. And, of course, you can follow her along on social media and on her website to get more information and tips. But, Doc, I really appreciate you taking time to join us on the show, and I look forward to seeing all that you have left to accomplish in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee. It was my pleasure. I really appreciate it.